we can't help but be so interesting and
Mm.
whatever. Like
Okay.
I think that definitely plays into it. Hello and welcome to Cup of Queers. My name is Sean, he, him, his.
I'm Lindsay, she, her.
And today we have our friend and guest, Zoe Stoller. Welcome.
Thank you so much, everybody. I'm Zoe, and I use she, they pronouns.
I am so happy that Zoe's back with us today. And I mean, we're talking about something that everyone deals with at one point, hopefully, as a queer individual, which is queer relationships. And there's some things that people don't always talk about. And I'm feeling like I'm now getting into a long-term thing, which I introduced on the last episode, Eek. Someone that I've been dating for a while, and so it's a big ass step. It's feeling really weird, and I'm having a lot of weird moments that no one talked about, and so I'm hoping to fill in some people with regards to that. How do you guys feel?
I have been with my partner for about 2 years, and so nothing new over here, but definitely still navigating the waters of a queer relationship. Even though it has been 2 years, there's still always something new coming up and just things we're trying to figure out, and we're growing and changing and exploring different identities and opportunities. So that's where I'm coming from over here. Zoe, how about you?
Yeah, so I've had both straight relationships and queer relationships, as I know you have as well, Lindsay. And I've definitely noticed such a huge difference in how I've navigated in those two very different worlds. I was in a long-term relationship for 3 years, a queer relationship, and that was my first one. And then we just broke up over the summer, and now I'm starting.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, I haven't really talked very publicly about it, just because it's been a bit of a roller coaster, but it's for the best. It wasn't really working out, and I felt like I needed some time to myself, especially because I entered into this relationship pretty quickly after coming out as queer, and we went on a few dates, and then we're just wifed up and dated for 3 years, and that was it. And now that I'm kind of back in the game or whatever, I'm I'm thinking a lot about how to kind of navigate that lesbian stereotype of moving very quickly when it didn't necessarily work out for me the last time.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? And that's what's in the back of my mind, too. And as I'd mentioned before you got in the podcast, this podcast will actually be clearer because I'll have a Wi-Fi box in my apartment because of Tyler, and he moved his Wi-Fi into my apartment. So that's a big ass step.
Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah. Yep. And so I don't know. And I'm feeling a little bit weird about it. And I don't know. It's not as though it's a problem that's actively happening, but it feels scary. And we're both in a first-time relationship, I guess. So that's why it's also, I don't know what to feel, if you know what I mean.
Sean, we kind of talked about that a little bit this past weekend when we were just hanging out on Zoom, and Zoe, just what you were saying, it's kind of weird because it sounds like we're all in the same boat or have been in the same boat, because my partner and I did the same exact thing that Zoe just mentioned, which was I had just come out of a relationship and also just come out as lesbian, and literally, like Zoe said, was just wifed up and have been wifed up. And that's where we're at. And Sean had kind of brought that up, what do we do? Because as queer folks, we literally just dive in head first, and it's not until later that you start to say, okay, well, either this didn't work or we need to make some changes to continue this relationship in a healthy way and also grow as individuals and things like that. And, with Sean kind of in a fairly new relationship, he's kind of is this, okay, where do we go next? What do we do? And so what a timely manner for us to be bringing this up.
It is. And I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but maybe it just has to do with the physical nature or the emotional one, but there's so much that has to do with chemistry, and when you find that person that really strikes a chord with you, I think that we just jump on it like hard and fast.
I've noticed myself kind of falling into that, pattern in all the relationships that I've had, even, the straight ones, where I just had so many feelings. And in those kinds of relationships, often the feelings were not reciprocated. And that's what kind of kept me, like at bay and prevented me from kind of moving too fast in the relationship because it was one-sided. But then all of a sudden in queer relationships, it feels like both people a lot of the times just want to jump in head first, as you said. And so they do because both people want it, at least in the moment.
Yeah, part of that is like the understanding that we have for each other as queer folks. Like, sure, in the back of our minds, we're like, this is probably not normal, but it's just maybe like a comforting place to be when you do start a relationship with someone who's like had, similar experiences with either their family or like losing friends or having to pretend to be straight when they're not, or whatever it might be. Whereas, when you're dating someone of the opposite sex, you're just like, hey, bud, yeah, sure, let's go on a date. Let's see what we might have in common. Like, do we feel like there's like that's a huge part of why we do that?
That is such an incredible point. And I did not even think of that, but I completely agree with like everything that you just said. And I was just thinking, it made me think like when I was on, my first date with the person that I've been like dating recently, one of the very first things we talked about was our coming out stories and kind of how we figured ourselves out and coming out, quote unquote, later in life. Whereas, in my straight relationships, again, as you said, it was just kind of like talking about life and nothing too deep because it was just a regular date, not a date filled with so much, history between each person.
Well, history and like trauma too.
Yeah,
because I feel like a lot of times we're like, we don't necessarily say those words or realize that that's what happens. But like, your partner's sharing this crazy thing and you can, whether your story is the same or not, you can empathize. And it's like, we have very similar trauma, which is like, I have done that with like, for example, my ex-husband, we both lost a parent. And I know that that was one thing that bonded us very closely is, not everyone has experienced that, thank goodness. But it's, trauma is a very real thing to bond over, unfortunately and fortunately.
Okay. And I mean, on the flip of this, we can't help but be so interesting and like, whatever. Like,
Okay.
I think that definitely plays into it.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, I just I don't know how much just the emotional part has to do with it because physically when you're getting into a physical relationship versus just the one that's like social, people are so much more ready to criticize straight people in comparison to gay people, I think, in general. I know that I've definitely seen a lot more people who are being controlled in the straight community as to how often they're having sex or how soon they are. Something that I wanted to talk about actually that had kind of fucked me up, and I talked to this a little bit about it with Lindsay earlier, but I like wasn't ready to talk about it publicly. So I went out and for the first time I was called a faggot publicly in the street. My boyfriend, it didn't hurt at all. I was like, whoa, that was kind of like shocking because I didn't know them. It didn't matter to me. And I was like, this is kind of big, but at the same time, whatever. The thing that actually fucked me up was when I was meeting my boyfriend's coworker and she asked me within like the first like 5 seconds of us talking if I like fucking my boyfriend.
What? Ew.
And they were like friends and she told him later on and I was like, what the hell just happened to me? Like I was trying to make my boyfriend look good at the restaurant he was working at by saying like, oh, this waiter was really great, by the way. Like I was just passing her, on the way out. And she was like, so much that you wanted to fuck him. And I was,
weird.
yeah, I was so fucking shook. Oh my God.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Oh my God. How are you feeling now?
Still weird.
Yeah.
But at least I can come on here and be like, whoever that lady was, or actually it was a girl, she was like my age, 20. I hope she's doing well. But I have nothing bad against whatever it is that she's doing, other than that quote. And I think that it just speaks to like the discomfort that people have as to how do they approach gay people and how they react to it. Because as we'd mentioned, like their brains just go straight to butt stuff in my case.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're sharing this though, because we had talked last week or 2 weeks ago with Sam, and we talked about like the creepy things that men say. And now,
Exactly.
I mean, this just goes to prove that, of course, everyone can be weird.
I know. And that's actually a misconception that I also had going into queer relationships, because in all of my, straight relationships, I had faced a lot of, emotional abuse and weird sexual things. And I assumed that now that I would be dating other women, that meant that there would be, no more like abusive people, no more manipulators, none of that. But of course, that's just not the truth, and I don't know why it was like a thought in my mind that like queer relationships are like perfect and loving and whatever, because things aren't necessarily, that anyone could be a bad person.
Very true.
Yeah, I hope you guys never have to deal with that though. Like maybe it is just men in particular that have to like have the public aspect so spotlit onto them, because it's much less obvious for two women who are hot to be hanging out in public together compared to me and Tyler.
No, we just get asked if we're sisters like all the time. So
Oh.
yeah, that's less offensive.
It's still very ignorant and, not good.
Exactly. Well, thanks for feeling like you could share that. And I'm sure like so many things, it's always better to get it off your chest. And that's what we are here for.
Thank
Yes,
you.
exactly.
I appreciate it.
So Zoe, you came out of a relationship that you moved really fast in. And I am currently trying to repair some of the things that we moved too fast on. And Sean is navigating this newly. So Zoe, now that you're doing this again and trying to be more cautious and aware of doing things like at a reasonable pace, do you have any tips for young queer people in their first relationship or starting a new relationship, how we can kind of like, or how they can kind of like kick back from the, I feel like, pretty darn expected trajectory? I mean, we all know the whole joke about the U-Haul lesbian thing. Like this has been going on for a long time where, queer people are just like, nice to meet you, here's a ring.
Yeah.
So let's talk about like trying to be, I mean, what is normal, right? Who are we comparing ourselves to? But like, how can we do this in a healthy way and make sure we're not then, traumatized or, scared to date someone again because we did move too fast?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the key word that you brought up is healthy, because relationships are going to look like very different things for different people, and everyone has different standards and expectations. But in the end, what's important is that a relationship is healthy. And in my relationship experience, because I've had many relationships, one like serious queer one, but I've noticed that, the dynamic that you kind of set up at the very beginning becomes like the foundation of your relationship, and it's very easy to kind of like stay within that dynamic. And then if you try to change things, then it brings challenges and conflict. So now what I'm trying to be really conscious of as I'm kind of forming a dynamic with this new person that I'm seeing is to be aware of what I want right now, what I need, and to communicate those and set boundaries, where necessary, because I think that's the thing that I was lacking in my previous relationship, in my relationships, plural, all of them. I didn't really know like what I wanted from the relationship. I was just open to anything, but then that in turn opened me up to things that I didn't really enjoy, but then I didn't feel comfortable saying, that I wasn't working for me because we were already kind of established in the dynamic by the time I realized it. So that's a whole roundabout way of saying, set your intentions before going into any new kind of relationship or before getting serious. Figure out what you want, and then don't be afraid to communicate that to your partner and make sure that you're on the same page, because if your partner isn't going to be able to, meet you kind of where you want or respect your boundaries or anything like that, then that's a pretty quick red flag that maybe this is not the person that you should be settling down with.
True. Thank you.
True.
Well, okay, this is like a really simplified version of what I think is important to me, and maybe hopefully to other people and to some degree. But it is like whether or not you're having fun, like A, is this fun still? And B, what it is that you need to do in order to make it a little bit less serious because at the end of the day, I think it's always nice to feel like the moment that you meet with them is like the moment that you can feel a little bit more at peace. And I think I'm just trying to seek out a little slice of peace here on earth. And whether or not that's with someone, that's not necessarily my concern, just as long as we're having fun.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, for sure. Fun is super important and kind of hard to do right now in the pandemic, and just keeping things, interesting and not getting too caught up in like how serious life is right now. Super important. And it's beautiful that you're able to do that and kind of keep that as like your gauge as to whether or not it's working.
Yeah, because I mean, anyone can like stick something out for like a day, a week, however long, but like, it wouldn't be worth it if we weren't having fun. So that's just my take anyway.
Well, that also brings up another really important point that, our experiences and our wants and our desires and our needs will shift and change over time. And what maybe works for us right now won't work for us a few years down the line. And that's okay too. I think it's wonderful that at 20 years old, you are very aware of what it is that you want. And I think you should fully pursue that. And if it doesn't work in the future, then you'll have the confidence to change it and make it work for you.
Yeah. And I think that we all like beat ourselves up about like what was working for us, whether that be like relationship wise or just everything. It's like we always look back and are like, why didn't we just slightly adjust it? And it's like, well, I didn't know any better, and we're just doing our best, because I'm making it abundantly clear in this relationship just how much I don't know myself. Okay. So like that's where I'm starting from, basically.
No, I think it's awesome. I agree with Zoe, like, and both of you. I mean, I'm 33, so I'm like the grandma in the room right now. Just kidding. I am so young. But like, my partner and I talk all the time about like how much more ready, like even people who are 5, 6, 7 years younger than us are to be honest and real and open and accepting. And it's just incredible to see. Whereas like we're much more like, ooh, like, is this okay? Like, am I allowed to, like Zoe said, like our needs change. And I feel like my age and up, we're like not as adaptable to that. We're like digging our feet in, or we're like, well, that's not going to work. And it takes us time to like trudge through it. Whereas like the younger people are like, oh, I want to change my pronouns, or I want to change this or that. And people are much more, I'm not saying that it's always perfect, but you all are like so much more understanding about life in general than I feel like we are. It's pretty amazing to be able to work with people like the two of you and hear your perspectives, and just like also be a little bit jealous that we that we had it a little more like, weird.
You're an angel. Okay, well, I really do appreciate all of your time today. Thank you guys so much for coming out, especially you, Zoe. You're always welcome back. You're our family. We love you.
Oh, thank you. I will definitely be back. I have the best time chatting with two of you.
Lovely, lovely. Well, thank you all for coming out today. And for those of you who are brave enough to come out and live your life freely, live your truth, as always. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I am your he, him host, Sean.
And I'm Lindsay, your she, her host.
And I'm Zoe, the she, they guest.
Lovely. Rate and review on Apple iTunes. We never fucking say it. Please do that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please.
And also follow Cup of Queer's Instagram. Yeah.
Just went live today.
Yeah. We finally did that. That was weird. Anyway. Okay. Cheers. Okay.